Coming to you live from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome to Africa Focus, where we bring you news from across the continent right here on Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dolka. Start interacting with us on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya, at Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Chacha. Send in an SMS via 111 But first, here are stories making headlines. 7 children killed in Cameroon after a massacre at a school in the English-speaking southwest of the country. Several people ransack and loot a government food warehouse in the central Nigeria town of Jos as a wave of social unrest hits Africa's most populous country. Sudan becomes the latest Arab nation to agree to recognize Israel in a diplomatic triumph for President Donald Trump, announced days before U.S. elections. We begin with the Africa Roundup stories, where Nigeria is reeling after security forces opened fire on protesters in Lagos, killing several, but authorities deny responsibility. Also, tensions rise in Ivory Coast ahead of posing October 31st election, in which President Alassane Ouattara is running for controversial third term.
Anti-government demonstrations in Nigeria turned deadly on Tuesday when gunmen opened fire into a crowd in Lagos. Eyewitnesses and rights groups say Nigerian security forces fired live rounds at protesters. Many people who were there at the time posted pictures and videos on social media. Amnesty International said 10 people were killed in the incident. The police and military deny that they shot at protesters. What began several weeks ago as demonstrations against police violence has since evolved into broader anti-government demonstrations, largely led by young people. A total of 56 people have died in unrest across the country, according to Amnesty. The Lagos governor announced a 24-hour curfew beginning on Tuesday at 4 p.m. to curb the protests. But around 1,000 mostly young people defied the measures, continuing their occupation of the Lekki toll gate, a major gateway to the city, where they'd been gathering for a week. However, as the evening wore on, there were reports that streetlights were turned off, surveillance cameras removed from the scene, and live rounds fired at demonstrators. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet said such reports suggested it was premeditated, planned, and coordinated. Witnesses shared their experience in the aftermath.
It was brutal. It's incomparable. It's beyond my experience. I've never experienced this in Nigeria before, but it is. No one can deny that governor is not knowing about this. Because why do they off the lights and killing people?
Just to see their face. They wear masks, some wear masks inside them. When they take on. So as they fire, they wear uniform.
Unrest continued in the following days. A fire began at a prison in central Lagos on Thursday, where smoke was seen billowing from the building. Shops were also looted in Lagos and cars set on fire. After 2 days' silence, President Muhammadu Buhari appeared on national television, warning protesters against continued demonstrations.
For you to do otherwise will amount to undermining national security and the law and order situation. Under no circumstances will this be tolerated.
The incident drew widespread international reaction. Rallies in support of the protesters have been held in Cape Town, Paris and New York, with major celebrities throwing their weight behind the calls for justice. In London as well, several hundred people marched from the Nigerian embassy.
For them to shoot unarmed protesters, that is criminal, and people died. Oh my God, these are young people. It was really heartbreaking. I'm not in Nigeria, but I have family and friends back home. I couldn't sleep, and I wasn't even there. I have cried my eyes out for the past 18 hours or so.
The US, United Nations, European Union, African Union and Britain have all called for those responsible for the killings to be held to account. Violence has swept Guinea following Sunday's vote in which President Alpha Condé appears set for a first-round victory, according to a preliminary vote count. The fresh clashes took place between security forces and opposition supporters disputing the poll. Cities across the West African nation have been plagued by violence that has left around 10 people dead since Monday, according to authorities. Opponents are angry that Condé is running for a controversial third term. He's already served the allowed 2 limits, but says a new constitution passed in a referendum in March resets term limits. In the opposition-supporting suburb of Bambeto, in the capital Conakry, residents say the vote was fraudulent, despite African monitors backing the process. Meanwhile, opposition leader Cellou Dalein Diallo declared himself the winner on Monday, before any results had been published.
It is for all of us to fight to preserve and to defend our victory, which you know is threatened by Alpha Condé, who had no voters but who did have an army of fraudsters. They have transformed the vote you placed in another in favour of Alpha Condé. We cannot accept this.
Guinea's Minister of Territorial Administration has called for an end to the violence.
The Ghanaian government, faithful to its principle of preserving peace and social tranquility, cannot allow this situation to take root.
Ivory Coast has plunged into a wave of pre-election intercommunal violence, which has left at least 11 people dead and 40 others injured in recent days. The attacks happened in and around Darboux, a port city near the main city of Abidjan. Around 15 people had already been killed in August and September as tensions mounted. Opposition leaders called for a boycott of the electoral process because President Alassane Ouattara is running for office again. But in his case, the argument is a 2016 reform which has reset the counter. Mediators from Regional Bloc, the Economic Community of West African States, were unable to break the deadlock. Opposition leader Pascal Affi N'Guessan, whose house was burned down in the violence, accused the government of refusing to make concessions.
We can therefore consider that the mission was a failure and that the problem is still unresolved, insofar as CEDEAO is not willing to negotiate with us and tells us to figure out a solution to our crisis.
Violence in the lead-up to the presidential vote has stirred up raw memories of post-electoral clashes that killed 3,000 people in 2010 and 2011, when then-President Laurent Gbagbo refused to accept his defeat to Ouattara. This village chief in the area of recent clashes is concerned.
We were the big victim of these events. You know, when we talk about the 3,000 dead in Ivory Coast, this is where it began.
Elections are scheduled to take place on the 31st of October.
Moving on, gunmen killed at least 6 children in a private school in Kumba in Cameroon. Protesters marched after the massacre at a school in the Anglophone southwest of Cameroon, which the government has blamed on English-speaking separatist militants.
Cameroon was in shock after a massacre at a school in the English-speaking southwest of the country, which the government has blamed on separatist militants there. According to Army spokesman Cyril Atonfak, the 7 children had been killed while the government had initially spoke of 6 murdered, and the UN said at least 8 were killed and 12 wounded by gunfire and blows from machetes.
I lack words to express the feeling I had when I saw the corpses of these innocent children. Like a father, I think I would not have remained indifferent when I saw their lifeless bodies lying in the mortuary. Even from the school itself. Oh, it was a sad situation.
Around 13 children had been wounded during the raid on the bilingual school in the town of Kumba, 7 of them seriously. Around 10 people on the 3 motorbikes burst into the compound of the private Mother Francisca International Bilingual Academy.
United we stand, divided we fall. United we stand, divided we fall. So let us be united, Kumba people, and take away anger from our society. Oh, yes. Yes, they are our children. We we are ready to receive them back to town as good boys and girls so that we can collaborate together with them, but not this kind of activity.
The aim of the attackers had been to stop the return of schools that had been taking place in the northwest and southwest provinces, where English-speaking separatists are fighting for independence. The two English-speaking regions in the mainly Francophone country have become the center of the conflict, with separatists targeting the army and demanding local government offices and schools to close. Rights groups have accused both the separatists and government troops of having killed civilians during the conflict since 2017. The fighting has claimed the lives of more than 3,000 people and forced over 700,000 to flee their homes. Separatists have also increasingly resorted to kidnappings and extortion, along with attacks on troops and police and arson assaults on public buildings and schools. Nyakundi Kelvin, Africa Focus.
Shifting gears now to matters politics, Guinea's President Alpha Condé won a disputed national election, setting the stage for a controversial third term. The announcement followed days of violence in which around 10 people were killed in clashes over Condé's re-election bid in the West African nation of some 13 million people. Electoral Authority President Cabinet Seizure said provisional results showed that Condé had won a 59.49% of the votes in the October 18th election. His main opponent, Solo Diallo, at the forefront of protest against a third term for Condé, was credited 33.5% of the vote.
Criticizing the independence of the Electoral Authority, Diallo declared himself victorious before the results were announced, which triggered confrontations between his supporters and security forces. Protesters hit the streets of Conakry again, and residents of some suburbs said police officers were firing tear gas canisters to clear them away.
Today it is the joy of Conakry. We won. All we want now is peace. Nothing but peace. You've seen how run down the city is. We want work to begin well. Alpha Condé is everyone's president. Not the Pule, not the Malinke, not the Gweze. It is Guinea that is winning. For us, Guinea is one and indivisible. That is what we know. Long live Guinea. May God bless Guinea.
While Guinea's Independent National Electoral Commission declared the provisional tally, the Constitutional Court must still approve the results. It's expected to do so in about a week. With his win, Condé is set to govern for another 6 years and could potentially run for another 4th term after that. Stiff opposition to a 3rd term triggered mass protests from October 2019, during which security forces killed dozens of people.
As rally of the Ghanaian people supporters, we are going to die here. We are going to die for the cause of Alpha Condé. This is Alpha Condé. We are not going to burn our steps. This is our homeland. We do not throw rocks here. We are not burning the rails of the country. This is our home.
In March, the president pushed through a new constitution which he argued would modernize the country. The move also allowed him to bypass a 2-term limit for presidents. Guinea is a poor country. Despite rich deposits from bauxite, gold and diamonds, that has known little political stability since independence in 1958. Condé, a former opposition activist who spent decades in exile, became the country's first democratically elected president in 2010 and was re-elected in 2015. Lincoln Wambogo, Switch TV.
Away from that, and now in the corridors of justice, Cameroon authorities have arrested 4 ivory smugglers attempting to transport nearly 120 elephant tusks through the country's south. The group had trafficked nearly 675 kilograms, which is 1,500 pounds of the illicit cargo, from neighboring Gabon home to more than half of Africa's remaining forest elephants.
The smugglers hid their haul in the bottom of a van with a false compartment. According to Customs Office Jean-Claude Ekobe, it was the biggest ivory seizure in the West African nation for 5 years. Ivory trafficking has been fueled by strong demand in Asia and the Middle East, where elephant tusks are used in traditional medicine. It is also coveted for its ability to be fashioned into items like combs, pendants, and other exotic jewelry. The global trade in elephant ivory, with rare exceptions, has been outlawed since 1989 after the population of the African animals dropped from millions in the mid-20th century to about 600,000 by the end of that decade. As you know, we are in a border region, and cross-border criminality is very high generally in this zone. So with the relevant officials, we have carried out this special mission to search and track contraband wherever it occurs. And this is the result, as you can see with these ivory tusks.
The traffickers use a lot of cunning too. Sadly, bring these prohibited products into the big cities.
Amina Hussein, Switch TV.
A time to take a breather. Stay with us here on Africa Focus. Still to come. French Foreign Minister calls on France and African countries to stand together in the face of what he described as greed and joking among major powers. Welcome back to Africa Focus. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Moving on, several thousand people have ransacked and looted a government food warehouse in the central Nigeria town of Jos as a wave of second arrest hits Africa's most populous country after looting hit Lagos and Ed in the country's southwest. Crowds of people raided a warehouse in Jos storing supplies that were meant to be distributed during lockdowns imposed to the control of the pandemic.
Several thousand people ransacked and looted a government food warehouse in Jos, central Nigeria, as a wave of unrest swept over Africa's most populous country.
What happened here today is that we came here and people were saying that they have stored food. So we came here to see, and we saw many people packing food. So during the lockdown, they were just hiding the food. It makes me wonder what kind of a government we have. We have been suffering and many people have died from hunger.
After looting it Lagos and Ed in the country's southwest, crowds of people raided a huge warehouse in Jos that was storing supplies destined for distribution during lockdowns imposed to control the virus pandemic. Relative calm prevailed Saturday in Lagos, however, where a strict curfew imposed on Tuesday in Africa's biggest city was eased as a week of violence also subsided.
This government doesn't tell the truth. They have been hiding this food since the lockdown. By now they should have shared the food. Look, a mudu of millet is 250 naira and a mudu of maize is 300 naira. How will a poor man survive?
Police stations had been burned, supermarkets looted, and vehicles destroyed as violence flared across the economic hub of 20 million, with officials accusing hoodlums.
Meanwhile, people on the streets of Khartoum have reacted after US President Donald Trump announced that Sudan and Israel have agreed to normalize their relations. Nasir Eldin has reiterated that he is against normalization because normalization does not serve the interests of Sudan neither now nor tomorrow.
Sudan became the latest Arab nation to agree to recognize Israel in a diplomatic triumph for President Donald Trump announced days before US election. The United Arab Emirates and Bahrain signed an accord at the White House last month to normalize relations with Israel, but Sudan carries added symbolism as an Arab nation that has been at war with Israel.
I do not see any problem with a normalization with Israel. There are many countries that have adopted normalization with us, and they are among the greatest countries and leading countries as far as I know. I think this is a very, very good step, and we support it.
Netanyahu, who met the head of Sudan's ruling council, General Abdel Fattah, in Uganda this year, thanked Sudanese leaders and US President Donald Trump in his statement. The February Netanyahu-Burhan encounter met with surprise and some hostility in Sudan at a time that the country's cabinet later denied that Burhan had made promises of normalization.
You will not find my opinion in me, and you will not find it in Hamdok, nor Al-Burhan, nor with the National Congress or Al-Shabi, and you will not find it with any of the political actors. Israel is in God's book. It's written. And what is the result of the countries that normalized with Israel? Any country that normalizes with Israel will not find nothing but humiliation and dishonor.
Former Sudanese strongman Omar al-Bashir was close to Islamists, including Al-Qaeda's founder Osama bin Laden. Bashir was ousted last year and replaced by a transition government which faces serious economic difficulties with a sharp depreciation of the Sudanese pound. Those challenges led Khartoum to press Washington to remove it from a US list of state sponsors of terrorism, which Sudan hopes will boost inward investments.
Against normalization, because normalization does not serve the interest of Sudan. Neither now nor tomorrow. Our country is considered the food basket of the world. We do not need normalization to improve our situation, make projects and investments, and raise the level of income. Our country, with its people, can become better than America, Israel, and all countries if we come together and put our hands together.
Earlier this week, the US announced that it will strike Sudan from the blacklist in return for payment of $335 million in compensation for American victims of terror. Before announcing the normalization deal, Trump formally moved to end Sudan's designation of a state sponsor of terrorism, which was a major goal for Khartoum.
Normalization has become a reality and inevitable, since it has an interest of the country because most Arab countries have normalized, and Israel has become present in our public life and the lives of all Arabic countries. And since it has an interest of the country, I do not mind because it has become an inevitable reality.
The Israel-Sudan agreement has a special resonance in Middle East. After the Six-Day War, which in 1967 saw Israel capture the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza Strip, the Arab League met in Sudan.
Elsewhere, French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian has called on France and African countries to stand together in the face of what he described as greed and joking among major powers, speaking Brazzaville, the capital of the Republic of Congo, at an event to mark a 1940 rallying cry by General Charles de Gaulle. Le Drian said the world is marked by brutality, by attempts at predation, and by rivalry between powers.
In a world marked by brutality, by attempts at predation, by rivalry between powers, we must stand together. This is also the spirit of the Brazzaville Manifesto, and I think that the best way to do so is to come together once again around this model that the French and Africans, after General de Gaulle's manifesto, defended together from Brazzaville 80 years ago.
Que des Français et des Africains, après le manifeste du général de Gaulle, ont défendu ensemble depuis Brazzaville il y a 80 ans.
Libyans have attended a gymkhana held alongside a vintage motor and art festival. It's a social and sporting event aimed at helping people cope with the coronavirus disease in Tripoli, all the while taking preventive measures.
كانت تحتور لزرع ثقافة أو
The idea of this festival is to cultivate a culture of coexistence with the coronavirus disease. This is a social and sports event which would have an impact on Libyan society. This is a worldwide pandemic and everyone has tried to address the issue the traditional way, through quarantine. Yet they haven't reached a solution except to learn to coexist with the disease, all the while taking preventive measures, wearing face masks, social distancing. Praise be to God. The idea is not to be the first, but to try to start cultivating the culture in the Libyan society.
مبدئيا في الموضوع نحن نزرع الثقافة هذه بالمجتمع الليبي.
With the current social situation amid the coronavirus pandemic, we are here for the equestrian jumping festival and the exhibition of artwork and handmade crafts. Everyone is wearing their masks, respecting the environment and sanitizing their hands. Everyone is wearing masks, adults and children alike.
Well, that's all on Africa Focus today, but keep the conversation going on our social media platforms, Switch TV Kenya at Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Joel Chacha and Switch TV. Thanks to all who made it a success, to my producer, Kelvin Nyakundi, my director, Joanne Kasavuli. My name is Joel Chacha and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Until next time, do have yourself a great day.